Good evening, everyone. In this presentation today, I'll be presenting about the British and French perspectives of communal life in 19th century Malaya. If you can see in the map, the British had gained control over the peninsula according to the yellow and the red parts. The British largely practiced a non-interventionist policy with fluctuating supply of raw materials and security to these Malay states. In Perak, the 19th century had become the melting pot for both the natives, who are the Malays and indigenous people, and the immigrants, who are Chinese and Indians, during the booming tin business as the Industrial Revolution took place around the world. Since there were British and French sources found in Perak during the same era, I had the opportunity in comparing them to each other. In 19th century in Malaya, one of the Frenchmen who surveyed Perak in 1884 had written a travelogue while looking for tin mining opportunities. In return to his services, the British gave him a land concession. These are the two texts I'll be referring to in this presentation. Firstly, Sir Frank Swettenham is a British colonial official in Malaya who was highly influential in shaping British policy and the structure of British administration in the Malay Peninsula. He also served as a resident of Perak from 1875 to 1876. Later on, he became the first Resident General in the Federated Malay States from 1896 from 1901. Whereas Jacques de Morgan was a French mining engineer, a geologist, and an archaeologist who had arrived in Perak in 1884. He was commissioned by the resident of Perak, then Hugh Low, to carry out his survey on the land for tin mining opportunities. However, at the same time, Morgan had offered to study the indigenous populations living in the mountains from an anthropological and linguistic point of view, and to bring back any documents that he could gather on the natural history of these unknown regions for Mr. Swettenham, who was then the Queen's resident in Selangor. The conceptual framework I'll be using here would be the British divide and rule policy and the French humanist perspectives. Richard Morrow was a political scientist who had argued that the colonial divide and rule policies consisted of A, the augmentation of differences within the conquered populations, and B, the channeling and exploitation of these differences for the benefit of the colonial power. Whereas the French humanist perspective, according to Montaigne, a philosopher of the French Renaissance, in his essay of Cannibals, he had used cultural relativism, which he then compared to the cannibals to the barbarianism of 16th century Europe. From his essay, I had extracted three main points that are relevant in this analysis, such as A, how continuous men ought to be of taking things upon trust from vulgar opinion, and that we are to judge by the eye of reason and not from common report. B, people never represent things to you simply as they are, but rather as they appear to them, or as they would have them appear to you. C, to find that there is nothing barbarous and savage in this notion, by anything that I can gather, expecting that everyone gives the title of barbarianism to everything that is not in use in his own country. I will analyze 5 different aspects of encounters and/or our engagement found in these texts. Number 1, native landscape. Note that both authors make a comparison with settings in their native Europe. In Swettenham, even though he sees beauty in the landscape, it still falls short when he compares to Slin being almost a village in Switzerland, and is surprised to see beautiful scenes in this outlandish landscape. Whereas Morgan's Whereas Morgan creates an emotional association with the cathedral and the cave because of the sound effects. Therefore, even in their reaction to their landscape, Swettenham tries to impose hierarchical relationship between Europe and Malaya. Secondly, native co-travelers. In this excerpt from Swettenham's excerpt, the different appears to be augmented in the disseminal and denigration of the other, and even those who he acknowledges as helpful are only identified for their role in aiding his journey and no more. Whereas in the excerpt of Morgan, while there is also the similar aspect of the native community aiding the white man on his travels, there is an added humanist aspect to it in terms of his acknowledgement of the native by name and as acceptable company. 3. Native food. Swettenham dismisses the local food that he has been served and augments the difference, highlighting the manner in which it was prepared and emphasizing what appears to be primitive way to him. For example, a fowl burned on the cinders, not cooked, and that there is no variation as they eat the same thing every day. While in the Morgan's extract, similarly notes a repetitive palate. His description reveals an engagement with the local way, more appreciating than denigrating. Fourthly, the native accommodations or the quarters, where they were both staying in the jungles. In the jungle, sorry. This is another case of augmentation that can be found apparent in Swettenham's journal. As we can see, both Morgan and Swettenham at this point indicate that they were in the jungle for the night and had been accommodated by the natives. Instead of being appreciative of what he had been provided with, Swettenham continues to only augment difference by pointing out on the negative aspects of the accommodation in the middle of the thick jungle, emphasizing that they are hovels and are wretched. Right? There are also words such as filthy, dirty, and miserable place, where there is a double negative appearance. In comparison, Morgan provides insight into the interior of the houses and focuses on the natural building materials, architectural details, and even local customs in the role of women within the space as they turn the heater, thus engaging with them or humanistic terms. Finally, the native clothing. In this section, we can clearly see the difference between Swettenham and Morgan on their adaptability when it comes to their clothing. We can see that when Swettenham claims that my coat and umbrella got torn into pieces by trailing thorns. And in contrast, in Morgan, he says, I wore Chinese and Malay clothing and almost most suitable in this very hot climate. Swettenham serves only to augment the difference in the natural surrounding and its negative impact on him. He also obviously keeps on to the European manner of dressing, with a reference to his coat, as you can see, and the quintessential British umbrella. In the Morgan, on the other hand, has adopted his clothing, seemingly aware of what was needed to acclimate himself to the local, his natural surroundings and its weather. Thus, yet again, Morgan engages with the other rather than dismissing them. In conclusion, while there is a notion of acknowledging knowledge and power in Morgan in the gathering and dissemination of information on the native population, the viewpoint engages with their lifestyle rather than completely dismissing it. In this way, we can see the influence of French humanist perspective in terms of the use of reason and the acknowledgement of difference, not as dismissing but towards understanding a different viewpoint and a different lifestyle. Finally, Swettenham, on the other hand, augments the difference between European or British and the other. He seldom engages with the locals, is extremely dismissive of their lifestyle and the natural surroundings in any way other than being dismissive, thus emphasizing division rather than crossing the boundaries towards engagement. Thank you.